Thank you. You're watching the program. Many thanks for choosing to stay with us. This is New Day Kenya, and the number is 0791478990. The hashtag on Twitter is New Day KE. The short SMS code is 40920. In the next 1 hour 30 minutes, we'll be talking to Benji Ndolo, senior political commentator and analyst, governance expert on matters developing in the country, and policy expert, who is Mike Olio on my immediate right. Linda is my co-host and the co-pilot of this show, and you can be part and parcel of the conversation. So we're starting with the developments that happened on Friday in Sagana State Lodge in Nyeri County, as President Uhuru Kenyatta convened a meeting with central Kenya leaders to iron out the differences that pertain, of course, their political standoff that underpins the Kieleweke and Tanga factions. Among the other issues that were also talked about in a report handed over to the head of state included the economic situation in the region and how Miraa, Pyrethrum, tea, and coffee farmers are feeling the brunt of the hard economic times in the country. But many are reading the political aspect in the large and the extensive sort, and this pertains, of course, the ruling Jubilee Party and how it might disintegrate if there will be no lessons from the top offered by the president. Benji, coming to you first on that. He was a bit patient and not as the usual bully pulpit, as is the case when he, on two occasions, read the Riot Act to Central Kenya leaders, one at the Corino Prayer Summit in Kasarani and during the opening of New Market in Karatina in Nyeri County. Did the president realize that the ground was shifting and that the sort of psychological response he wanted from the region wasn't coming forth?
Good morning, my brother, and thanks for having me. Morning, Linda.
Morning.
You know, the president, obviously, in the course of doing his work, it's a course of duty, regularly receives intelligence briefings. And so he knows that the ground, you know, vitu hapana sawa sawa. Vitu ni different, you know. I actually was in Gatundu myself over the weekend.
South or north?
Both.
Okay.
Because I went to north through south. It's a beautiful place. Lots of new roads coming up.
And new estates.
New estates as well, yes.
People
The Banda homes and whatnot, yes.
Yeah.
But we need new furniture on the roads. You know, the roads are coming up, but you need signage. You need, you know, just the basics. And you get a feeling that there's a lot of disenchantment, dissatisfaction on the ground. That we have a problem with distribution of the shilling. That we talk about these supplementary estimates, as is on the headline today. 32.3 billion for SGR, 4.8 billion for health, 1.36 billion for public safety and security. But there's a general sense that Kenyans are very broke, which you heard the president talk about that last week. And I think this is why he had to kind of change tack, avoid a lot of confrontation on the ground, and actually call his leaders to Sagana. That was quite tactical. And one of the things that I personally took out of the Sagana meeting was his insistence that I think the president is very worried about how he's perceived. That's a fact. How his government is perceived to be corrupt and inept. And so his theme, his recurrent theme, and this will go to my next point, his recurrent theme is no politicking. And that's even when I went to my different functions in Gatundu with Honorable Wanjiko Kibe. We reiterated, the president talked about no politics, let's focus on development. Because there's too much internecine wars in Jubilee and so much political jostling and whatnot. Which, my final point as I summarize, I'm accused often of supporting the DP, but...
Is the accusation true?
The accusation...
He's the only person to tell us whether it is or not, yeah?
I actually went to a function on Saturday and some guys just confronted me. I think they're ODM guys. And they just said, Beji, you're so unfair online. You know, wewe unapigania to DP. And I said, you know, that's interesting because I think the DP has himself to blame for a lot of the woes that he's going through. I think that if you took time to understand Uhuru Kenyatta as a person, I think there was really no problem with transition, with succession. and he said it, that I know what I need to do, but you don't have to wake up every morning and tell me what to do. I know what I need to do. And so they have preempted him, they've pressured him, they've done all these funny things, but I think there was really no problem until the DP's own over-aggression. And yeah, it's true, because Ruto was an extremely, the driver that just dropped me, I just took a cab here, and he's like, I can't believe we got over 10,000 votes in Kibra, because it used to be zoning. You can't step there. That's why it's called a bedroom.
Right.
So, you know, that aggression is good, but over-aggression can actually backfire and have a negative effect. And so I think it's only fair to understand that the president's very concerned about how he's perceived. He's very concerned about different things, the impoverished sense that a lot of the Kenyan workers feel and are going through. And so he's just asking for a little space to work. But he could temper some of the language. For example, when he says, leave me alone, I know what I'm doing. Things, that doesn't augur well. You know, things are really tough. Industries have collapsed, and that's what you had a lot of what the so-called Tonga are talking about. And there's really no time. I keep saying this on this show, Linda. There's no time.
Okay.
I mean,
It's
2
barely
years,
2 years or so.
and then now BBI,
Yeah.
then a referendum and a general
The boundaries
election, and
review.
it just came out. Yeah, there's
There's
just
no
no time, which I'm sure we'll talk about then,
As we
how
proceed.
that dovetails into the folly of BBI. But,
All right.
yeah.
Okay, still on that meeting, Mike, without reading too much, into him calling, people from the Mount Kenya region, what does it speak to the rest of course, the regions in the country who look forward to President Uhuru Kenyatta as one, of course, a symbol of unity? And we're not trying to say that he should not meet, a certain region or a certain people in a way. But then again, in an environment where we're talking about the factor of peace, of fronting so much, of course, unity, coexistence as a country, what does it speak to them? And also looking at, the fact that one would consider that a closed-door meeting, a special meeting that was really hyped. No journalists inside, no words, smartphones and everything. Do you suppose then that there's probably more to this than what we see today or than what was presented to the eye of the public?
Thank you, Linda. For me, I have 3 questions that I think I need to ask here. Did Uhuru Kenyatta address the problems of the Mount
people of
Kenya
Mount Kenya.
region when he met their leaders on Friday? Did he or did he not? That is the first question. Secondly, what does he think of the Jubilee Party, which now ties in with the last question you've asked me, and that is the one I'm going to answer first. Then thirdly, why are people worried about his succession?
Right.
Do they think they are better off by the time he's leaving office, or will they be worse off? But let me start with question number 2. What does he think of the Jubilee Party? And what does he think about Kenya? When Mwai Kibaki gave Uhuru Kenyatta the ceremonial sword, when Mwai Kibaki was getting out of office, it was the embodiment of national unity for the whole country, to bring the country together and lead as a president now, not as a tribal leader. And we cannot create excuses for him that he needs to address a certain section in his own language. And that was my concern. And I started raising these issues late last week when I heard that he was going to meet them together. And I said, what about his supporters elsewhere? Assuming that he has a certain group of supporters inside Jubilee. And you see, it has already boiled over the weekend. Now, the Kalenjin MPs are saying, hata sisi tunataka mkutano yetu. Na huyu mzee.
Because they have in some way, the political right, because they backed him up.
Yes, of course.
The 2 elections.
They said, you belong to our party, and we are also members of this party. Now you've met a certain region. We also want our own meeting with you. And what about now the president's supporters in Kisii or in Bungoma? Because he's got a lot of MPs in Bungoma. Will he also organize a meeting to meet them differently? That is a question he needs to deal with, because politics is about perception. If you create a picture that you are only the president of a particular region in a country, it doesn't augur well for you. But then I want to go to the next question, which was actually question 1. Did he address the problems in the region?
Did he, in your view?
He did not. Because what are the problems in Mount Kenya region?
Coffee.
The problems in Mount Kenya region is about coffee,
Tea.
is about tea,
Milk.
is about milk. Kwanza those three.
Mira.
Oh yes, Mira, yes, because the
Yes.
Merus were also there. A very big issue. The other thing that needs to be addressed for the Mount Kenya community is the issue of small-scale traders, because they are all over, whether it is in Nairobi or in Central Province or in Nakuru, they have a very powerful presence as small-scale traders.
Traders, yeah.
Did he address these issues? He did not. He did not at all. He talked about very many issues, telling them that he knows what he's doing, they should keep calm, but time is running out. And
He's been there for 7 years or more.
Of course, he's doing his second term.
At some point in time, indeed, Mount Kenya region, of course, leaders claiming that there's nothing progressive that is happening within that particular region. You know, in what very many people sort of thought like, okay, well, this was politically instigated. Is there some level of reality when you look at the ground, you know, in comparison to the past leadership?
What I thought President Uhuru Kenyatta was going to do was, I thought he was going to present a scorecard to the leaders of Mount Kenya and say, I've done this for you guys, I've done this for you guys, I've done this is what I've done for coffee, this is what I've done for tea, this is what I've done for Mira, and this is what from here going forward, this is what I intend to do. He did not do that. Now, and that now brings me to the last question which I asked. According to Uhuru Kenyatta, why are people worried about his succession? It can only be two things. Either they do not feel well off, they feel insecure that by the time he leaves, he will not leave them well off economically. Because you see, when people are not economically stable, they become very insecure.
Okay.
But if you leave people when they are economically stable, even if you leave Benji here now with 10 million shillings in your account and you go away, Linda, he'll just tell you, oh, Linda,
No
have a
problem.
good day,
Yeah,
no problem,
I know.
we'll see you.
Proceed.
But if you leave him here and there's no pen in his pocket, he'll wonder, sasa unatuacha aje hapa?
Can I interject?
Okay,
Please
no
do.
problem.
I don't mean to change the format of the show, but something interesting has just come up as I'm listening to Michael's response. And I just wonder if Linda and Ayub can help us on this. You know, President Kenyatta came to office at age 50, very young.
Yes.
You've just said he's been around 7 years. I wonder, what is it, do you guys feel, that is the issue? Because this issue is always glossed over. 7 years, what is it that President Uhuru is not doing?
He's not doing.
Because it's like he's poised to fail. There's no time. And I'm only asking this also because I really want to help. I talk to his people, I want to help. You know, it's really unfortunate. If you think about, you know, President Kibaki today is 88 years old. He came to the presidency at 71. What do we feel on this table that is wrong? I really want that answer. Because I know I'll be asked that question at some point.
When you see so much resources channeled towards what he terms as, of course, some of the
Big four.
developmental issues, big four, for that matter, and we're talking about the question of time, do you suppose in any way that this can reach that level of realization in the country in the first place? And of course, notable points that probably he's brought aboard in regards to what, you know, different regions face in terms of difficulties. Numerous times we've seen the question of agriculture trouble. He has, you know, called on, you know, the Minister of Agriculture a couple of times. You know, he's probably not seen this minister out of the seat, Kinjuri, at some point in time. You know, sometimes you probably expect action in a way.
So mistakes of his own making.
More or less the same
Because
thing.
the same mistakes that state officials do, who he appoints, then come back to
Come
haunt
back to
him.
him.
Exactly. So hiring of incompetent people. Because Ayub, you know why this is more pronounced is because, and I look at a lot of things on social media. You look at the president's interaction, for example, with his security detail, or even AD camp, as an African statesman. How many presidents will talk to an AD camp? Are you kidding me? A commander-in-chief.
Well, that was when he
Yeah,
saw off
I saw that.
the Lesotho
Exactly.
leader in the state of Nairobi. And then he was
Exactly.
dancing, more or less.
Totally. That's, I mean,
Is he not human before he's a president?
but that's what I'm saying.
He's
But
only-
that's, Michael, what I'm saying is this is not typical whatsoever.
Okay.
And therefore, a lot of his supporters are pained as to what could be going wrong when you have someone so lovable,
So friendly.
adorable like that. You see, and so that's the challenge for
He's
me.
not
It's just to
exercising
try
words,
to
yeah.
figure out, you know, in other words, he's not getting his due as far as a leader. So how, he doesn't deserve that.
Okay. It means then that, Benji, when we talk about that, we have seen in many, or on many occasions in which the president was so friendly, he wanted even to interact with someone who was selling a banana when he was coming from, I presume, Kajiado County.
Yeah.
So friendly on many occasions that you can know from his facial expressions. The persona is good. But then again, the same state appointments that he made, the same state officials are letting him down. And the fear is that the president might not be able to take the lead in the fight against all the aspects, corruption, negligence of the state commission projects, including, look at what we have here on the paper, that is page 8 and 9 of the Daily Nation. Billions of Kenyan taxpayers' money going into West. Literally, it means then that there's something obstructing him from offering the lessons from the top. May I ask you then to be very blunt, the deep state?
Thank you. It's a good question. I wouldn't say deep state per se. I would say either, and you see me, I'm very courageous. Either the president is also corrupt, okay, or people very close to him that are indispensable, including family. But this is like surgery. Something must give. President Uhuru was very lucky to, evade a very big and bad case, ICC, and in so doing become the president of our country. It is really sad that failure in general is imminent, and this is what we're trying to avert. We cannot just spectate and gaze as we face economic ruin. The economy, we cannot afford to have the economy collapse. Michael, I think you agree.
We cannot allow.
We cannot allow a situation where a newborn today owes over 100,000 shillings, the national debt, and the national debt keeps rising. So it's on the back of these realities that some of us are having this discussion.
Let me ask this question. Does it then call for that need of a revolution, or does it then, of course, poses to that point whereby there's going to be that need of a revolution from the people of Kenya? And then what does it speak to the factor of nepotism that you've brought about, the dynasties?
Actually,
should they be worried? And then where will it place
Kalonzo
it?
alluded to that. He said this might be the
end of the
point.
yes.
The bread
Actually, that's an interesting question, Linda. And you can see now how my disruption has led this to become
a whole different
deep conversation. One of the president's own supporters and friends mentioned to me confidentially that some of the things that we're seeing is actually what could be the trigger to a political revolution. I think over the weekend you've seen a clip going around of a young girl, a young lady, talking about the JKUAT students.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's gone viral. She talks about being outraged.
Yeah. She's dropped 2, in 1 week.
Yeah, exactly. Or 2 videos.
2 videos.
I saw one, yeah. A lot of this is unnecessary because I call it provocation. Kenyans are hungry, jobless. They are selling the only cow to put a child at JKUAT. At JKUAT, watoto wanapigwa ngeta. Rape has now become a weapon and a common one. And then when they protest, you beat them up so savagely and tear gas them without applying any thought process to what you're doing. This is completely unnecessary, and just as a reflection of what is happening in society now, you actually had, for example, the army officer that took a long time to premeditate murder, bring in his young kids to Nanyuki and his estranged wife, and plot how he would single-handedly kill them and get rid of them. This is, you see, the society is, this is only possible because of the Obado case, because of all these different, there's something wrong because of the Axe case, was it in KMTC? The guy that hacked his
that is
Ivy Wangeshi case. You see, for us also in media and leadership, you have to take a step back and ask what is really going on. And so all of these things, resonate with how you see the leadership setting the tone and setting the direction.
Okay.
With such
Which is
meetings,
why, again,
Mike,
we have to...
Yeah.
does it then
course.
mean that probably such meetings that we're talking about, and probably we hope that, of course, the president is going to meet a couple of other leaders because then he's the president of the nation, does it then craft a path or a route to prosperity in a way? Or
Thank you.
again, it's a waste of time?
Thank you, Linda. That question ties in with what Benji was saying, and I wanted to talk about the age that Uhuru Kenyatta became president. You said he became president at the age of 50?
50, yes.
50, yeah.
From a very personal perspective, I do not think that age should be an excuse, because Uhuru Kenyatta was succeeding a living president who did so much. By the time Mwai Kibaki was taking over from Nyayo, our national budget was a paltry 200 billion.
200 billion.
Yeah.
Which is now
270 billion.
at around 6 trillion.
You see? So Uhuru Kenyatta had a wonderful opportunity to learn from this guy. He just lives here in Muthaiga. Kibaki has not even gone back to Nyeri. He's just here.
And we don't see politicians flocking to his house.
They are not. They're not taking advantage of that resource. They should be having a lot of conversations with that guy and asking him, Mzee, hey, this thing is getting out of hand. How do we go about it? Because that Mzee, strictly speaking, he's been around for a while, since the Kenyatta days until he was with Moi, and then he took over and he ran, and we saw the Thika Superhighway. So it's not even that we are doing big projects that have never been done. He did them. And he left us in a situation where things, at least even commodities, the prices were affordable. Now they've shot. I don't know. But you know, you drink camel milk. You know the price of cow milk?
The packet.
There was that list that was making rounds on social media and across, of course, just comparing what was back then and what is in terms of the prices of, the food, the commodities in the market. And it's heartbreaking to see.
Yes, it's heartbreaking. So when you are succeeding somebody who is still alive and things are not working for you, consult him. Have a word with him. Pay him a visit. Have a cup of tea, dinner or lunch, and say, hey, help us in this matter. You will gain a lot of, by just talking and understanding.
Is he not getting enough of that from Right Honorable Raila Odinga, who's part and parcel of the handshake and equally was during the Nusum Kati government?
I don't know what they usually discuss when they are together. Do you?
Certainly not. Well, at least they said they did not. At least this one we're sure about. They did not discuss anything to do with 2022 politics of him backing him.
Yes, but
that one we're sure about.
Yes. But if I may come to Benji, because there seems to be a lot of issues that are incorporated or were part of the maiden Sagana retreat by Central Kenya leaders, led by the president, convened by the president. But you look at the hierarchy and the mode of invitation. Some were called from State House, some were given a call by the president himself, some were called by county commissioners, and some were called by the local area
MCAs.
chief and MCAs to attend that meeting. And the
others were
Tanga
not there
faction
from Mount
were
Kenya.
locked out of the VIP dais, according to revelations by Moses Kuria, while some who came late at the same time as the Tanga MPs were given access to the VIP dais. It tells a lot that this was a divided meeting. And does it explain perhaps that in 2 years' time, mathematically, the president cannot attain the economic plan that he had in mind in 2013, because in 7 years he has failed to do so? Does it explain that he has a region that backs him, and is he made buoyant by that belief that he has a region that will back him?
I think you have hit the nail on the head. When you do accounting or auditing, 7 years against 2, you can already see where we're heading. Unless there's a drastic turnaround.
Magic, eh?
Unless there's pretty much magic. You can see where we're heading. And so we all know from many instances and just from studying the president that he's not so shy when it comes to self-expression and communicating his feelings, okay? Because some of the leaders, by being quiet, someone like Kibaki, for being quiet for a long time, you not really know how he feels about something. Yeah, it's true. He just, I think if you read some of the books, for example, we talked about Nusum Kati, and some of the failed, remember some of the failed meetings that were there. For example, I think it was it Sagana? It was one of, I think Sagana Lodge, or one of the lodges where the Prime Minister and the President then had a whole day meeting to talk about issues in the Grand Coalition government, to bring the government together, etc. And the report was that, Kibaki just wouldn't sit. They just went there, wasted the entire time and came back. He just wasn't willing. And he wasn't saying much at all. This is all recorded in books. This is all
in Miguna's book.
Yeah, and several other. And you see, it's a public place, so it can be in Miguna's book, but it wasn't just the two of them. There's many, staffers. Just because a lot of Kenyans are not very open in talking about these things or in writing doesn't mean that it doesn't happen. Miguna is coming from Canada with a different culture, with a different openness, with a different aggression. But again, President Uhuru is very expressive when it comes to how he feels, etc. So the so-called Tanga, yeah, they're not going to get VIP. They're not going to have access. Same with Waitito, same with the different guys, even this Sonko here in Nairobi, because he's angry about them upstaging him, about the disrespect and what have you. So there's no news there. Of course, they are lucky to be there.
But of course, within the minute, do you think, of course, he was able to bring some of them to his pocket in regards to the BBI? We saw Waitito fronting that the other day, who's considered, of course, to be part of...
Waitito is just trying to survive. He's got big problems. Waitito is...
so he has to survive.
Yeah, Waitito's got big problems. Remember, Waitito had been found unfit to hold public office by a ruling of the Justice Mumbi.
Yeah.
It's what first precipitated his move from Embakasi to Kiambu County, first as Member of Parliament, then as a springboard to become governor. For Kabete, exactly. So he's got serious problems. I understand he's made an offer to pay back about 700 million shillings
700 million
to the
money.
DPP. Not 70 million, 700 million, $7 million. What are we talking about? So he's got major issues.
That is one man.
Yeah, that is one man. I mean, and remember his daughter had 100 million shillings in her account.
The wife.
Yeah, it's exactly. It's who he's accused together with. And so BBI continues to be, again, I fault the Ruto team for being too untrusting, for being too assertive, too aggressive. I don't think they should look at everything as a weapon and a tool.
Against Ruto.
Against Ruto.
Okay.
And just for practicing too much of the confrontational politics. Because some of the things they did even at Sagana, will be perceived as disrespectful to the president. Some of those tweets and whatnot, it's too much. And it's also going to raise the other issue that's going to be subject of discussion very soon on why is it that it seems Ruto must be president of Kenya, do or die. Why?
Okay, we'll come to that.
That's the future.
There's a question.
We have a time. We'll have
time. On the very same note, of course, we'll come and discuss that.
I like the do or die question.
A short break. So yes, allow us to.
And it applies to Raila as well.
Back.
Welcome back. You're watching the program into the second segment here. Still talking about the Sagana retreat, the outcome, and what it means for the political landscape, and to be specific, the ruling Jubilee Party, even as President Uhuru Kenyatta appeared more patient and sought an understanding from the leadership in the mountainous region that has been rumbling. But to what effect will it come down the restive mountainous region of Mount Kenya? Mike, if I may come to you then.
Yes.
He also, the head of state I'm talking about, talked about the BBI, in which he said, expressively, showed support for the BBI, in which he said that there were some parts of Nairobi I wasn't, as the head of state, able to step foot in, but now because of this, we have managed to contesting Kibra, defeated, our candidate came second, and that again, he said, explains perhaps the need for the coming together of me and the opposition chief Raila Odinga. But then again, he is a president who, on many occasions, wanted a sort of reverse psychology from the region, but it never gave him a response. Number one, then, did that happen because of the dire economic situation in central Kenya? Number two, is it because of the shifting political ground owing to the well-oiled machine of the deputy president campaign tool? Number three, what do you think is precipitating the president to convene this meeting when on two occasions spoke in his native Gikuyu language, and there has been no response whatsoever from the ground in terms of the political response?
Thank you, Ayub. But first, let me say something about your earlier question to Benji about why some people were not allowed to sit in the VIP and some people were allowed, like my friend Kuria.
And to top up on that, because then it's in regards to Ruto, in a way. When the president says that I know what I said and I know what I'm supposed to do, does it then clearly show that indeed that's a nod for the fact that he's going to support Deputy President?
Yeah, that's commitment.
That's commitment.
Yeah.
All right.
It's okay. First, let me address the Kuria thing.
Yes.
It was the height of disrespect for the president to call a meeting and then Kuria arrives after the president has arrived. You don't do that.
But sometimes they do
however powerful
deliberately.
you are.
But Mike,
deliberately.
to be fair to Kuria and to be fair to the viewers watching the program, Kuria came. He wasn't allowed to access the dais.
First
dais.
say he was late. He came after the president.
Yeah. But Mauka Maure, an MP, who also came after Moses Kuria, was allowed to access the VIP dais. What was the message then?
The message is this.
The message was that they perceived Kuria to have done so deliberately.
Yes.
That was calculated to come late. I've been around these guys, so I know how the game is played. So
That is
Kuria has been mobilizing politicians, has been mobilizing the ground, and so he came to make a grand entrance. And
Yes.
that's wrong. It's a breach of protocol, and it's disrespectful to His
And
Excellency
to
the
steal the
President.
thunder from under the feet of this guy.
Correct.
Right.
Yeah, it's
Okay,
wrong.
Go ahead.
Yeah.
And they know each other. They know those games.
He's his MP.
That's
Yeah, exactly.
He's MP. So Kuria must not be spared, even though he's my friend and yours. He did the wrong thing. He should not do it again. Now, you've talked about the shifting grounds in central Kenya. Or is it that the DP's aggression has gained ground in central Kenya, so the president feels a bit threatened?
It has.
The thing is, the truth is, it has, because the DP is more outgoing politically in this term than number one.
Right.
When was the last time you saw number one in Bungoma? Or in Wajir?
Yeah.
When did you last see him?
That is the president?
Yes.
2017.
You see? And number two?
He
He's
met-
all over.
He met in the first,
And in 2 months, we're in 2020.
yes,
Yeah.
In 2 months, we're in
we're
the
in
year
2020.
2020.
And he made more than about 30 trips to central and western Kenya. 17 in central Kenya and about the
Who,
rest
the
in-
DP?
Yes, the DP.
Yeah, but the problem with that is that 30 trips is basically campaign.
All right, what then does it mean?
So-
is the president, of course, was this a political strategy that one would consider, as an art of war, where now the president is now gathering them, befriending them in a way, and then ensure that they have put their guard down, and then he's going to attack?
Maybe he'll do that. But I wanted to talk about why there's a difference between the DP's approach and number one's approach.
Yeah.
Politics is about visibility. If you are not very visible, it's very easy to become irrelevant. That is why Ruto appeals in the central Kenya region, because he's usually with them. He talks with them. He interacts with them. They see him. They can relate with him.
They feel
can
him.
predict him, what he's going to say, how he's going to react. But you see, when this guy, number one, stays away from them, it's like a parent who is away from the family. It's very difficult to connect and to feel at ease in each other's presence.
Right.
So it is real that he has to deal with that problem in Mount Kenya region. And not only in Mount Kenya region, throughout this country. Because the DP is moving around a lot. Hate him or love him, but he's very active on the ground. And it pays dividends in politics. Kuenda tu mahali na kutwanga siasa, it's usually very important. Because people think about that last visit and what you said and who you came with and what they said. At least he's always in people's minds and they're talking about it. Now, when the president talks about Kibra, he had very interesting, the views he gave about Kibra was very interesting, according to me. According to him, there was no violence. According to him, it was very peaceful. For me, I could only think that about three things. Either he was fully briefed that Washiali and Halwale and Didmas Baraza would be thumped in Kibra, so he didn't give a damn about it. That is why he did not see it as strange. Or two, which is very unfortunate, he could be used to big-time violence, so what happened in Kibra was hiyo ilikuwa shadow too.
Hiyo ni kwa kidogo.
Alright.
Hiyo kidogo that should not
He
bother
actually
anybody.
gave it a clean bill of health.
Yeah.
Sincerely. That was, to him, that was annoying.
The third scenario that came up in my mind is that he was sending a message to Kenyans that you are literally on your own. Whatever happens, whether you are thumped in Kibra or in your neighborhood, that's actually none of my business, and it's your headache, and you should deal with it. That is why I found his comments on Kibra very interesting, probably even entertaining in themselves, because they are deep issues that he talked about. The fact is, there was violence. The fact is, people were beaten.
Right.
Not less than members of parliament were beaten, and we saw them running.
Yes.
Some were even hospitalized. That should not be allowed to happen in a civilized and peaceful nation.
As, of course, the people would ask Benji,
Yes.
who is fooling who? And then looking at the utterances of one Kimani Ngunjiri, as a member of parliament, Bahati, coming out to say that, President Uhuru Kenyatta should wake up to the fact that, even the four leaders or the previous leaders, of course, were not working in tandem with Hawa Watu, and I'll use his words, and we all know Hawa Watu wanamaanisha kina nani. So when he says, or he cautions the president against working with Hawa Watu, what does it mean? He says, your very own father is the one who started the battle or the rift that we witnessed today between the Luo and, of course, the Kikuyu, escalated to the level of course, Kibaki. Who are you to assume that you would work to bring unity? I mean, should we just overlook such utterances or even say it's okay? Well, this could be a special case then that will seal the gap that is there between these two key communities in the country.
Yeah, so Mheshimiwa Ngunjiri would, his comments would underscore the importance of BBI. In making those utterances, in making that argument, he would then be unwittingly making the president's argument and the former prime minister's argument that we need BBI, etc. What it also demonstrates is that sometimes the more things change, the more things remain the same. This is also the product of tribal identity in politics and mobilization of ethnic communities as an ideology or as a strategy in politics. That said, it also now raises the question, Ayub, on the role of, and I'm looking at commentary here by Khartoum Guyo, Daily Nation, page 14.
Yes, if you can have that up on air, Mr. Director.
On the role of the Cohesion Commission.
NCIC.
NCIC.
Right.
A working NCIC is actually supposed to do what BBI proposes to do.
Yeah.
As far as ethnic, harmony, building bridges between communities and regions. And that's why I have often expressed that the problem with this country is not lack of leaders, is not lack of laws, is not lack of even constitutional ideology and what have you. The problem that we have is a refusal to implement the Constitution. Because all these things are actually in the Constitution.
And I was coming to that point, which is equally important.
A refusal to implement the Constitution. And then a finding, therefore, that we go the long road through Garissa to get to Lavington from Kilimani. Because these things are actually in the Constitution, both from an integrity perspective, from an accountability perspective. The things Kimani Ngunjiri is saying are unpalatable as far as defining Kenya and putting Kenya first. Because now he's talking as an ethnic Kikuyu.
Right.
And he's going back to painful wounds.
Yes.
Because, Jomo Kenyatta jailed Jaramogi. So it's also contemptuous. But, and the other side will prey on this as a weapon to fight. And so one of the things that is coming out of even this article here by Ms. Guyo is how even BBI, if you look at the whole discussion and campaign and suspicion and the juxtaposing of dynasties versus hustlers or
The people.
ordinary
The common one.
proletariat, is that how they call it? It's a hard one.
Yeah, it's a hard one, I know. Tongue twister.
It raises greater divisions and deeper divisions in the country. And so I wish that one of President Uhuru's legacies, having gotten there into power, would have just been, you know what, done it, let's implement this constitution of Kenya. Hii katiba. And everything he does, let him just go back to it. Even for his own friends. Let him say, open chapter 6. They might say, oh, you, what about you? No, I'm the president now. Open chapter 6. This is the requirement.
Step aside.
Open cohesion. Not step aside. Go away.
Okay.
End of story. Would have had discipline in 2 years. And with it, performance.
Linda,
Okay, Mike, this... Okay,
I want to talk about this Kimani fellow.
Utterance.
Gunjiri. His utterances were fatalistic and defeatist. But my take is very simple. Kimani Gunjiri is not a strange fellow. Kimani Gunjiri is a manifestation of a disease that is prevalent across Africa. And that disease is called ethno-nationalism. Ethno-nationalism is an existential threat to the African state. It's only that sometimes we pour cold water on it. Even in Ethiopia now, there's a problem.
It's huge.
The Oromos who put Abiy Mohammed in power have certain grievances now that even Abiy is not sitting pretty. True or not true? And it is replicated in all these African countries, and we need to deal with it. Kimani Gunjiri may not be that sophisticated to relate his utterances to what is happening elsewhere, but he's a local manifestation of that problem that is bedeviling the African state as we are talking. And the reason why I also know that he's not that sophisticated is the fact that something did not work then logically does not mean that it cannot work now.
Right.
Okay? That is simple reasoning. It might have failed then because of very many factors. The actors could have been different. The circumstances could have been different. The environment could have been different. Remember, Jaramogi and Jomo were living during the Cold War, when the world was literally polarized in the middle, pro-East, pro-West, and there was war all over. The Cubans were in the continent supporting one faction against the other. They were in Mozambique until the other day. They were in Angola until 1975. Those were different times. Now, Kimani Gunjiri needs to realize that the Cold War is not there. The actors in the world stage are totally different. Their views are totally different. The leader of America, as we are talking, simply thinks of America first.
Yes. And make America great again.
And make America great. He doesn't care about you guys. You can make noise in Ukraine if you don't investigate Joe Biden. He can deal with you the way he wants. The world has changed. And people like Kimani have been left behind. They need to come to their realization that the world has changed.
But then who is fooling who? As we wind up on this particular subject, I think it's important that we cross over to the other in what has been captured here. I mean, between the key figures. The key figures.
The three key figures on the front page.
No, I think Uhuru and Raila are genuine in their effort to bring the country together. So nobody's fooling the other, in my opinion.
Is being fooled?
And Ruto, let me just
What
tell
does
you.
bringing the country together mean?
Let me give you my view about Ruto.
Right.
Ruto has every right to fight for his political space. Because in politics, you must fight for your own space.
1 second, Linda.
Nobody's going to hand it over to you.
1 second, Ayub.
So let's hear.
How will Uhuru and Raila bring the country together?
First, they are the most polarizing characters in this country as we speak. And they said so on the steps of Harambee House when they did the handshake on 9th of March.
They acknowledge.
They said that they are the true picture of the divisions that bedevil this country. And it's true.
Right.
When they did their handshake, do we still see disruptions in the streets of Nairobi?
So how are they, back to my question, how are they going to bring the country together?
By choosing peace instead of war is very important.
You need BBI to choose peace over war?
What are the assurances? The assurances and the guarantees?
Let me help you with the answer, because I know kind of what he needs to say but doesn't want to say. Are they going to work together by one being the president and co-prime minister of the other? You know, this...
Because he said, I don't mind being the prime minister in 2022. That's what he said.
I actually don't think he said it, because I know he doesn't want to be the prime minister. But we just want to expose some of these games that are ongoing. And the only good thing that I can say about this is, you know, Kenyans are gullible, but they are, to be honest, also waking up. They're waking up to the fact that there's a lot of manipulation going on here, that things have not changed in 50 years. Things, if we continue this way, will not change in another 50 years. I don't know that in a functional democracy, and you know, Michael is a policy person, so he should know this better than me. I don't know that in a functional democracy, that the two leading most polarizing figures in Kenya today should be the sons of the first president and the first vice president 50-something years ago.
56
That's a fact of
56.
life. That's a fact of life. And we have educated people in this country. We have a country with multi-party politics. We have a country with so many options. I don't know if we should be going down the path of let's be boxed in by sons of leaders from decades ago, or if we should take the path of looking for viable leaders and solutions that bedevil our country. But finally, let me also ask the policy person. It's fair to say that this debt problem that we have has been created by the current leaders. Are the current leaders going to undo the debt problem that they created? Just imagine, we talked about on this desk.
No time.
This is a policy man. On this desk, we talked about the fact that under Uhuru's presidency, we've borrowed more money than since independence to after Kibaki.
That is the total of all the presidents. His father, Kenyatta Senior, Moi, and Kibaki, combined.
So may I answer? May I?
Yes.
Yes, go ahead, please.
Question one should be, what is the motivation, or what was the motivation for borrowing these loans? Why did we borrow them?
To inject the economy.
Did they achieve the purpose for which they were borrowed?
No, hence the complaints.
No, they haven't.
If they haven't, if we do an audit report and we realize that they did not achieve what they were meant to achieve, then how then can the same people who put us in that hole remove us from the same hole?
That's what I'm asking you.
It will not be possible.
So what comes, and that has been my question,
Yes.
the assurances and the guarantees, besides the calm political environment in the country, that the coming together of Kenyatta and Odinga, and Kenyatta to be specific because he is the president, he's the state property and the head of the country, that is going to turn around his legacy, which appears tainted by allegations of corruption, incompetence, and patronage, more so the need for the turnaround of the current economic situation, which is on the abyss.
He also talked about an audit. How are you going to audit when the auditor is a pariah?
You know, a country, I heard you talking about a functional democracy, assuming that ours is one. We may have reservations about whether it is a functional democracy or not, but assuming that ours is one, when you have a functional democracy, then it means that you have institutions that work. And you have structures that you can rely upon to deliver results. So if you want to do an audit, there are institutions that can easily do that audit for you and deliver it. Problem is, if you don't allow those institutions to work, then they will not do that audit for you. If you do not allow the office of, for instance, of the Auditor General to do its work properly, if you do not allow the office of the Control of Budget to do its work properly, if you do not allow
Ayub,
the ones that
Allegations
you
are
created.
equally, allegations are, of corruption are
Ayub,
equally within
you know how
the
you
office
know
of the
we have a
Auditor
long way to
General.
go?
Yeah.
Should anyone have, and even if you read the Constitution, should anyone have the powers to allow or not allow? Can President Trump decide whether to allow the FBI to look into his conduct, to look into his taxes, to look
no, he
into...
cannot.
You cannot.
Because they are,
But that's exactly my point. And that's why I say...
So
and, you know,
within our very own country, okay, well, sort of makes sense.
the certain institutions.
Linda,
Our
Benji
institutions
knows,
ignore it.
as well as all of us here know, that there are so many ways that this current government has undermined independent institutions.
Yeah, right.
We know very well, for instance, that there's a time, there was a meeting in State House when the president was asking the Auditor General, sasa unataka kuenda America kufanya nini? You remember when the Auditor General said they wanted to follow the Eurobond and
Yes,
to
do some tracking so that they can corroborate.
and addressed him directly. Akamuuliza, sasa wewe unataka kwenda Amerika kufanya nini? You know, wasn't that a form of intimidation?
It was.
Well, the Constitution guarantees that this is an independent
This could be in the
office.
public domain, and he
was summoned a couple of times in State House.
Yes.
Where he was asked to shed more light.
We have interfered with our independent institutions,
Can't we go
even
against the
though
odds?
our Constitution allows
The
them to
figures
exist.
there go against the odds. Of course, the nullification that we witnessed was historic, and in what many people thought would not happen. I mean, can they
And
just
what was
go
the
against
fruit
the
of that?
odds?
And what was the fruit of that?
Yeah.
That the judiciary said another institution, the IEBC, which is an independent institution, presided over a process that was marred with irregularities and illegality.
And illegalities.
An institution exposing the rot in another institution.
Another institution, yeah.
What does it say about the entire system then of the independence of the institutions that are constitutionally guaranteed in the country?
Ayub, now you are wrong. Who said that institutions are supposed to cover for each other when there is a mistake?
Compliment.
But he's not
did the
he's
right
not talking
thing.
about anything.
Please compliment
So
each
the
other.
judiciary was right.
The court did the right thing.
They
in
said,
saying
you
the
guys,
IEBC
you did the wrong thing.
And-
Even
but
though we
he's
belong
not-
to the
he's
same
not-
government,
Yeah.
Okay,
you did the right thing.
This was my point,
But
Mike.
he's not condemning it.
Okay, the Supreme Court did say that the process as IEBC presided over as the umpire was marred with irregularities and illegalities.
Correct.
So it laid bare
Yes.
that IEBC did not conduct the process
And
as
that's the
required
way it
by
ought to
law.
be.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
my case in point, my question is,
Yes.
we're having an instance where one institution, an arm of the government, is exposing the rot in another institution.
That's the way it should be.
Does it explain then the deep problems that we are in terms of the capacity of the independent institutions?
It
Yes.
explains the justification for the existence of those institutions. To check on each other, to audit each other, and to explain to the people what's really going on.
Why
how
then
these
does it
institutions
not
work.
go to that level of, giving us the ultimate solutions to it? Because we've seen them, trying to flex their muscles, trying to act as though, yes, we're going to act independently. Then all of a sudden, there's some level of calm. Is that the kind of interference that you're talking about?
No. You see, like when the judiciary nullified the presidential election, if you remember pretty well, it said, you guys, the IEBC, I'm not going to point at Benji here, because he's my friend. let me point at somebody imaginary. You guys, I'm giving you another chance
60 days.
to do a repeat of this exercise and make sure you do it well. And if you don't do it well and it comes back here again,
We'll do the same.
we will do the same. Correct,
Well,
you remember?
Well, it went back
Okay.
there, and they did not do the same.
That statement
didn't do the-
iliwasha moto.
Let's also look at it from this different perspective here.
Sometimes I forget we're on air.
Yes. One director, if we can have this picture up on air, because it's a cartoon expression of today's Daily Nation edition, and it's all about the business class, the economic class, and
Flying
beneath that is
undocumented.
the what happened at the Jomo Kenyatta International Airport of the Kenyan who hid in the wheel compartment of Boeing jet that took off from Jomo Kenyatta International Airport and was set for landing at Heathrow in South London. Two different perspectives, Benji. One,
I'm sure you saw my tweet on that.
yes. Manyasi did say, according to the investigations by Sky News, that he wanted better life.
Yeah.
He wanted better economic opportunity to better
Yes.
his life.
Yes.
Because he was paid 300 shillings a day by the cleaning company,
Yeah.
which again disowned him as per the investigations.
Yeah.
The airport authority did say that we have no record of Manyasi here because we have the biometric registration system.
Cover up.
Okay.
Yeah.
Number one, does it explain, or is it just a microcosm, a drop
Yeah.
of many Kenyans who want to venture into prosperous other parts of the world to have
Yeah.
these better opportunities? Number two,
Yeah.
the security situation at the Jomo Kenyatta International Airport. Just
Yeah.
less than a year when we had given the nod by the authorities in the USA of the direct flights between New York and Nairobi. Does it depend that?
Yeah, that's a good question, and I'm quite well placed given my many years living outside as a young man and just having the opportunity to contrast life between here, London, here, Washington, Chicago, etc. Just before I touch on that, Ayub, hey, you guys have really stepped on a live wire by reminding us about the exact text of that ruling. And I remember on the rally that followed,
We shall revisit.
the We Shall Revisit rally. Everyone focuses on what
Yes.
the president said,
Okay, Benja.
but people forget what DP Ruto said. DP Ruto said, and I quote, alafu ile koti ilisema wakiletwa tena watafanya hivyo. Sala wangwana. It was so serious.
Yes.
And let's just laugh because it's very painful and unfortunate. Having said that,
Benji, can I just interrupt you?
We take a breather.
We take a breather because
And
of
then we
time.
come back with that.
Finish up on the point, and we head to the maritime issue and the sort of understanding between Kenyatta and Farmajo regarding what they say the ICJ will not hamper our neighborly relations in the geopolitical context on
let's
the
take
Horn
a
of
break. Yeah.
Africa region.
Yeah.
After the break, though, we are coming back to discuss that, and of course, the attention will be on the Horn of Africa region. The number is 0791478990. The hashtag on Twitter is NewDayKE. The short SMS code is 40920. Stay tuned. Well, welcome back. You're watching the program into the last segment. But before I take this intro, let me allow Benji to finish up on the earlier question before we went on break.
Yes. So if you watched the expose by Sky News, it raises a lot of issues. And for me, the best part of the best part and the saddest of that expose was the comment by the resident of London, the citizen where that body landed, because it almost hit.
Yes.
You know, it just fell out of the sky. I guess when the landing gear
Because
opened.
the body was frozen.
Yeah.
Because of the temperatures.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's minus 60 degrees up there at that speed. So it was just a rock, you know, of a human being. And the Brit who was interviewed there by Sky News said something that struck me, that stuck with me. He said it really is so sad to imagine the depths to which people will go to come over shores and come to lands such as ours, which I'm born here as a Brit, we take it for granted. That healthcare is good, healthcare is a guarantee. We take it for granted.
Wow.
That a police officer is an educated, polished, clean gentleman or lady. We take it for granted. That the bus line runs on time, that the streets are clean. And just to see what people from certain parts of the world, mostly Africa, and some of the Arabian, you know, peninsula, what they go through to get here. And so it goes to the issue that I was touching on before we went on break, Ayub. You know, $3 a day.
300 shillings.
It's $3 a day, 300 shillings. To have to live on that, unakula, you have a family, you're paying rent. And as I said, you know, in the 90s when I first, you know, did my first excursion to go to school and to live outside Kenya, and just to realize that even working as a part-time student, you're earning about 600 shillings, 700 shillings, 1,000 shillings an hour. An hour. If you look at the disparities on income between countries, an hour. Minimum wage, which you hear this all the time. You heard this during the Trump campaigns and race.
Yes.
Minimum wage, you know, during the Hillary and Trump campaign in 2016. So that it works out to about 8,000 shillings a day. Compared
and you can
to
actually work twice.
300 shillings an hour. So the exploitation in this country, and that's why there's the cover-up. That's why this company here, Colkit, whatever it's
Colnet.
called, Colnet, you know, they're very, it also underscores, by the way, why this expose was not done by our local journalists and media houses. Because of the fear, because of the manipulation, because of the embarrassment. They're only waiting for this thing to die down. They're not looking at staff welfare. And that is the gambit, by the way, of Francis Atwoli, who has been there for a long time. But Francis Atwoli is also more concerned with Raila's position.
Yes.
And creating a new position for Uhuru.
Than the welfare of laborers.
Than the welfare of laborers who themselves can't feed their families. So this is really, really, really sad. But I think, Ayub, lastly, the other thing that this also demonstrates is, and I have a friend of mine who got a contract at the airport to do some work a few years ago. And his general manager was a graduate of the University of Nairobi. And I remember my friend telling me that the first time they went to do field survey was the first time his GM had ever seen a plane. So he was like shell-shocked just to see an aeroplane. And this is not like a really poor guy. This is just a lack of exposure. So to imagine, just to imagine, this young man who works at the airport and sees the planes has, I think he had never flown. He has no idea or concept of the mechanics of flying. He actually went to bed and thought and said, you know, I work in the airport, I'm gonna leave Kenya. I'll wear a warm jacket, I'll bundle up myself, I'll carry my bag. He studied the plane and thought, I'll go into the wheel of the landing
space.
gear, the wheel space, nitalala hapo, nitaamka London. That is so sad. And now our family has lost a son.
Yes.
A family that is equally disowning.
Because there seems to be a lot of revelations.
Perceived family.
And then the fear is that the Jomo Kenyatta International Airport as a facility might again be affected in terms of its first status international airport, since the New York Nairobi direct flights were commissioned in 2018. Mike, I'm coming to you.
Yes, please.
But after this, now, the South China Sea is one of the most disputed regions in the world, and as is the case with the Mogadishu-Nairobi maritime dispute, it's about the stretch of ocean contested by China, Brunei, Indonesia, Malaysia, the Philippines, Taiwan, and Vietnam. An international tribunal ruled that China has no historic rights to resources in the South China Sea. The freedom of navigation under the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea, UNCLOS, examines excessive claims on maritime space. But on the silence of the concluded ICPD conference in Nairobi, President Uhuru Kenyatta and his Somali counterpart Mohamed Abdullahi Farmajo assured that an ICJ outcome will not injure the neighborly relations between Kenya and Somalia. This comes even as Kenya said it prefers an out-of-court settlement, as was echoed at some point about a month ago by the CS Foreign Affairs, that is Dr. Ambassador Monica Juma. I'm coming to you, Mike, then. Yes. On that note. A lot was discussed, but the two gentlemen finally saw the need for the coming together of the two heads of state. The last time they met was in March 2019, after the Ethiopian Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed tried to mediate between Kenyatta and Farmajo, but that failed in a state house in Nairobi. Did they come to the realization that there was no need for middle-level bureaucracies and that the two heads of state can iron out the differences and see the light for the future relations between Mogadishu and Nairobi?
Yes and no. Eventually, the two guys, Farmajo and President Kenyatta, hold the key to peaceful resolution of this matter. Let's not forget that in February this year, we actually expelled the Somali ambassador from here, even though the PS now is
Macharia
called Macharia Kamau.
Yes.
He tweeted very fast that we had not expelled him. We had just told him to go back for consultations. And we had also called ours for consultations. Why would you ask somebody to go back for consultation if his government has not called him to go back for consultations? The fact remains we kicked him out. And they realized later that that was not the right thing to do. This is just a dispute, a maritime dispute that can be resolved. Now, I want to talk about the speech that they gave on Thursday.
Yes.
I watched that speech and they said the ruling from the ICJ will not affect their relations. That was a very political statement. They knew they were insincere. The outcome of that court will hugely affect their relationship. That is how these things work.
In your predictions, it would go in favor of?
Let me give you the background, then you'll see where I'm heading.
Okay, then her guess will be as good as yours.
Yes, your guess will be as good as mine. Up to and including now, I do not understand why the AU has not been enjoined in this case as an interested party. Why? At independence, African countries agreed that they would maintain the colonial boundaries for peace to prevail. Otherwise, everybody else was going to claim somebody else's territory. We have very many of our ethnic groups that are overlapping in other countries.
Yes, the Maasais, the Luos,
the Maasais are in Tanzania, they are here. The Somalis are in a special case. You know, the Somalis are like the Kurds. The colonial fellow made sure that they were distributed. Some were left here, some were in Somalia, Djibouti. Some were in Ethiopia, and some are in Djibouti. Just like the Kurds. You know, they are in Syria, in Iraq, in Iran, and Turkey, and Azerbaijan. So that is a special case. So the Somalia claim is very simple. they want the border to run diagonally. Kenya wants it to run parallel to the equator. The complication is, the reason why I wanted the AU to be enjoined in this matter is because if the order is given in favor of Somalia to run diagonally, it will affect the whole of Africa. Because then Kenya will also demand that the border with Tanzania should also run diagonally.
And then
Tanzania will demand the same from Mozambique. Mozambique will demand the same from South Africa. It will affect the whole continent.
Right.
So the reason why I wanted the AU to be enjoined in this matter is so that they can bring in this special argument and make submissions on this matter and say, just a minute, this is the picture as it is. And we are giving you a perspective that these warring countries may not be able to address satisfactorily before you. We are coming before you as friends of this court to shed as much light as possible on the possible outcome of this matter.
All right.
So can you guess where I was driving at?
Yes, I can guess. Within this court, they say there's no appeal chamber, no lower chamber, no nothing. So no that room for, of course, amicus curiae and all that. And then the question then would be, when we're talking about the African Union, why does it have to go to that level of the ICJ when we're talking about constitutive measures to address issues of Africa? I mean, is African Union not well poised to offer proper arbitration when such issues arise?
It is. It is. Actually, the AU already have an issue on this matter. They have a stand that all matters in Africa should be resolved at the AU level before they go to the International Court of Justice. In fact, the entire membership of the UN has that agreement that issues between states should be resolved at the local level unless it is completely out of unless they can't handle it. That's when it is supposed to be escalated to the United Nations level. We did not do that. We have the AU here, we have the East African Community here, we have the IGAD here. Somalia chose to go direct to the
Kenya had an option of consenting or not based on Article 35, but they still proceeded to agree to be taken there. Do you suppose then they had seen some level of fact that they would win? They had put all this into consideration?
You see, if you are sued and you fail to show up.
Again, that's another.
Wow.
As much as maybe you can, you have that option of consent, yes.
And there's also equally the aspect of compulsory arbitration under Article 287 of the UNCLOS, that forms.
When did all this begin? In other words, who was the aggressor?
That was under an agreement in 2009. That was during the transitional government in Somalia and the Mkatinusu government. That when Moses Wetangula served as the Foreign Affairs Minister. Signed an agreement between the two foreign ministers, which the Somali Parliament in 2014 relooked at. And said...
And the agreement said what?
Well, the details are confidential.
Why should they be confidential? You know, I'm just trying to look at the genesis of this problem. So Moses Wetangula signed an agreement on what? And Moses Wetangula's integrity has always been in question. It's not funny, Michael. It's not funny. We had a very serious issue with Tokyo.
The Tokyo embassy.
Yeah, with the
about
Tokyo
2 billion Kenya shillings.
Scandal,
it's
not funny at all. It's not funny at all. And so, sometimes when you have a problem, the point I'm making is that you have to hark back and just try to see when the rain started beating you. Because this is a serious situation. You talk about the expulsion of an ambassador, tensions with a neighboring country. I think Famajo is really trying. But I'm just curious, where did this problem begin? And why should an agreement from 2010, you said?
2009.
2009. Is it not subject to the constitutional principles now, and the Constitution 2010, which came in a year after, of two things: public participation and right to information? Article 35. Article 35. And the reason for that, by the way, on the back of allegations of the Tokyo embassy scandal, what if in that agreement, who knows what concessions were entered into in that agreement? I'm reading a book right now on Trump, several books that I'm looking at. And you remember the Helsinki meeting that was such a storm?
Yes.
So his entire team...
Where he met Putin.
Yeah, exactly. His entire team, including Secretary of State, insisted, Mr. President, you cannot meet Putin alone. It was almost a fight. You can see how many of his staff have been fired or have resigned. Up to today, I'm told all cabinet, support positions have not been filled, advisors, and what have you. And so it again raises the question of sincerity around integrity and what have you, because I just don't even see how there's a dispute how do you have a dispute in international court on Kenya's territorial waters? Or, for example, on Migingo? How do I have a dispute with Michael over his watch? So it's, we are also talking about waste of resources. Again, in countries, Somalia has really now come a long way. But I think for over 2 decades, Somalia hasn't had a government.
For 28 years.
Imagine, almost 3 decades. And so Somalia does not need to be embroiled in tussles with its neighbors. Somalia needs to be borrowing the expertise and support of its neighbors to stand up institutions quickly.
How then do we address this without,
You see,
ignoring the imperialist factor, the West factor, the hand of other people on this, or the bigger brothers on this?
I always ask, because I saw this discussion when they removed the AU ambassador the other day. And when they talk about the exploitation by France and what have you. I always ask, Linda, when all these things were being done to Africa, where was Africa? When you were being brainwashed, colonized, etc., where are you yourself? Well, you're also a person.
Well, that might explain again the outcome of the Berlin conference about 135 years ago, when Africa was, there was a meeting to discuss for more than 104 days how to partition and divide Africa into sections.
And where were Africans? And so once again, the reason for that rationale and that argument is we want to move away from a political leadership style and governance style of excuses, where leaders just come and say, it was China. It was the British who did this. Where were you when you're signing the concessions? When you're signing away, your land? You must start to have real solid leaders who take decisions in the best interest of the people. So they say, and I've seen this discussion even online yesterday, the day before, on concessions. There's a lot of debate on the Mombasa Highway, for example, and the allegation that there's kickbacks expected. On the company, the US company, American company. Bechtel, exactly. And so we must have these discussions around what is in the best interest of our people, what is sustainable debt, what are sustainable projects, what are projects that will mean jobs, and what are projects that will mean aflatoxin. We must have those.
A fear of the unknown, fear of history repeating itself. When they look at, the fate of the likes of Sankara, Thomas Sankara, the likes of course, Anwar Sadat and all this, don't you think at some point it would trigger them to a point whereby they'll have to, abide by what the biggest see?
It's true. That's a good point, that very strong leaders like Steve Biko, etc., have always been taken out. But you see, leadership sometimes is not about just one individual per se. It's also about inspiring others and mentoring many other leaders. Okay. Because the fact is you cannot take everyone out.
Then Mike, I wanted to say something about this.
Okay, go ahead, please.
Somali
a couple of my question.
Yeah, because before you pose your question, Benji asked a question here and we did not answer him. The source of this problem. Personally, I think we can roughly guess where this thing started. This dispute was not so big until when Somalia got irritated that Kenya supported the election of Madobe in Jubaland.
Well, the suing was in 2014, way before even Farmajo came to power.
Yes. But the escalation of this matter came now with when Kenya openly backed Madobe and Madobe was elected in Jubaland.
Because he's a Kenyan, isn't it?
Now you see. Now you see.
I've heard that.
So that explains part of the aggression. The second part of the aggression, we need to say it as it is that Farmajo himself, actually Farmajo is a nickname, he's called Mohamed Abdullahi. Mohamed Abdullahi. He's facing an election in 2021. And like all other presidents who face an election, you need to show that you are the macho man.
That you're working.
That you are working, that you can stand up for your people, your territory, you are the guy who can take up everybody and fight
I hate that
them
aspect of politics.
and crush
the
them.
cheap side.
So Farmajo is also conscious that he needs to show the Somali nation that he's the guy who can protect them from these invaders called Kenya. So basically that's where we are headed. But again, there is something we need to address. As we are speaking now, that matter in the court, in the International Court of Justice, is in limbo because Kenya successfully lobbied to have it stood over until
It constitutes
8th of June 2020, which will be a Monday. Why is that date important? That date is important because elections into the United Nations Security Council, where Kenya and Djibouti are fighting.
Yeah.
They're not just vying,
it is
they are actually
a
fighting.
serious contest there.
That election is also coming up in June. I don't know if the date has been set, but June will be a very interesting month.
in 2020.
In 2020. And I know on 8th of June 2020, this matter will come up, and the first activity will be oral presentations. I don't want to say that Kenya will be looking for ways of dragging the matter so that the elections at the United Nations Security Council is finished first.
Finished first, so then we can.
Then they can do what they want to do. That one I can leave for you to guess. But that is where we are,
Okay.
and that is where we are heading.
Yes,
Probably a
let me come
strategic
to
move,
Benji,
yes.
because there's equally the important aspect of the Foreign Affairs Ministry here, because there are some who have questioned the capacity, the lobbying capacity of the Foreign Affairs docket in the country, because at some point, the likes of Atuoli and the presidential delegation did point out that there was a mess, standoff between Monica Juma and PS Macharia Kamau, because the president was literally snubbed during the TICAD conference in Tokyo, Japan, in which Kenya hosted the same conference
TICAD,
2
the
years,
year before,
yes, 2 years
Yeah.
before. That was in 2016. Yes, in 2016, 17.
Should have been 16
And
then.
that, again, they said explained perhaps the standoff in the ministry, the sort of the bad blood between the cabinet minister and her peers, and perhaps explained why we are very poor in our lobbying capacity, and the element of, again, a sort of not being up to speed with the diplomatic pressure that comes forth with Kenya being the blue-eyed boy in the region. Does that explain?
Can I give you the short
current
answer?
situation? Yes.
And it's interesting because I've been asked about this before on a live broadcast by Jeff Koinange when the current cabinet was being named after elections in early 2017. Yeah. So I'll specifically ask this question. My short answer, my short honest answer, Monica Juma is not really the right person.
So to point a finger, or right person
And,
for
you
the
know,
docket.
It's really, 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 really sad how we are doing things in this country, because clearly there's a problem. She's more of a technocrat. You remember Monica Juma had a long-standing feud
With Amina.
With
member,
Amina.
not only with Amina, but even with members of parliament, where she was ejected out of Interior Ministry as
Yes, she served as PS, yeah.
named by the president as secretary to the cabinet, held in abeyance for 6 months because parliament wouldn't approve, and then the president ultimately had to find her somewhere, which was she was then packed into foreign affairs. I know that it is our culture to gloss over issues. I know that all of these things are uncomfortable to talk about. I know we'd rather not talk about them. Her own husband is a good friend of mine.
Professor
I,
Kagwanya.
Professor Kaganja. I know a lot of the backroom, or the background
Or the
discussions that went, because she was nominated by the president and couldn't sit in cabinet. That's a fact of life. As secretary to the cabinet, position held by Francis Kimeme before. And so she lacks the skill and the finesse to do the people side of policy. That's why the lobbying is weak. And so as we laugh here on set, let me reiterate what Ayub said. The president was snubbed in TICAD. If I'm his minister, I'm answerable to him. He's asking me, what happened? Where was I lacking? And we've had several of... Remember we had a big failure, I think that was under Amina. Was it at the AU?
AU Commission.
Where we were sure we've gotten it done, A lot of money was extended and expended
A lot
in
of
lobbying.
yeah.
And it failed flat. But all this is just amusing to some of us because, you know, the truth is too bitter to swallow. I think that we need a better practitioner. Actually, my honest opinion, if you ask me, I think Macharia Njeru, who's a former UN ambassador in New York, and I've met him personally.
That's Macharia Kamau.
Sorry,
Macharia Njeru.
Which one was in New
Kamau
York?
is the current
Kamau is the
principal
current.
secretary.
But where was he before?
In New York?
Yeah. Yeah, he was in New York.
Okay.
I've met him. I think he would be better positioned to lobby and execute the functions at the CS level. And what I suspect is that because, to me, he seems so different from his boss, I suspect that there's a lot of tension and a lot of chaos there.
Within.
But again, all this is, especially in foreign affairs where it's a diplomatic docket, I'm sure all this is concealed very, very. But knowing Kamau, knowing Monica is very good on the technical aspect.
The technocracy aspect.
So I would probably retain her as an advisor at advisory level where I can take or not take her advice. But at PS level is
Where
execution. At CS level, you know, you're the face of the president.
Overall, yeah.
You see, at senior advisory level, you can either take or not take. But she is now pressed. I mean, look at how many blunders have been there. Even on the issues of Kenyans held in South Sudan.
Yes, the Kenyans who were held in South Sudan, yeah.
And on many different, you know, Kenyans who end up in capitals and sports ministry hasn't paid, and they're unable to check out of a hotel, they're unable to get a flight or have food. You can see that Monica is hard-pressed on what to say, what to do, until she's pushed. So that's a lack of leadership. But we'd rather not talk about it.
All right, Mike, in 30 seconds, anything else that you'd want to say as we get to wind up the broadcast?
I can say very many things.
I know, but in 30 seconds, though.
What I think, let me talk about Djibouti and Kenya in June next year. Something happened in 2016. Netherlands and Italy could not agree.
Yes, briefly because of time.
And
so they shared?
They shared 1 year each. Maybe that's what Djibouti is looking at.
Really?
Yes, 2 years, 1 year each.
But in 1960, Turkey and Poland made the UN General Assembly vote 50 times.
And they ended up sharing.
And they ended up sharing 1 year each. So maybe that's what we are heading towards.
Wow.
Thank you so much, gentlemen. Of course, senior political analyst Benji Dolo seated right next
We've
to
already,
me.
we've already.
Time is up,
Time flies.
of course.
Time flies.
Michael
Time is
Leo,
money.
public policy analyst.
Only one sentence.
Yes.
I'm looking at a lot of what the misunderstood KFCB is doing. I'm sure you guys are under that regulation, Kenya Film Classification Board. But I'm just looking at the zeal of the leadership there and just wondering if that zeal was expended across government.
The moral policeman.
Ezekiel,
The moral policeman.
Yes. Wow,
You know, in fact, I was talking about this vis-a-vis in the context of KEBS. Can you imagine bringing fake sugar or mercury in this country if Ezekiel Muto was there? Is that possible?
Remember, he's a man of God before he's everything else.
These are some of the things I think.
He would sit you down.
Integrity
with the
matters
Bible.
a lot to him.
Yeah, so I'm looking at that and trying to see how
I
we
interviewed
can.
him here. He said, I'm living in my house, the same house I lived in 10 years ago. And nothing has changed. I'm just serving the public in my capacity.
Right.
Is that the definition of integrity?
No, not in an extensive capacity, but he equally was just giving an example of
Just
how
a matter of time. We'll be, of course, looking into his work, in what he's done at that time when he's exiting the state. Then we'll say, okay, moving forward, I think this is a figure we still need back in whatever capacity. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having us. Thank you, Mike.
Thank you so much.
Lovely week ahead.
Was this camel tea again?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
I can tell by the taste. Charcoal brewed, very nice.
So he's not on our side.
I've had 3
My name
cups.
is Linda Alela. Was doing this alongside Ayu, but of course the gentleman right here. We have to say kwaheri. We see you again tomorrow.
Thank you
you
so
very
much.
much.
Today you've not called him Sheikh.
I said.